right, I'm getting started. I'm Elaine Howard. I am a consultant who specializes in urban renewal. That's all my firm does. I've done it since 2005. I've worked, I like to say, from Astoria to Pendleton to Burns to Brookings and kind of everywhere in between. I do the majority of urban renewal consulting across the state. So I know I know a lot. If I don't know, I know where to find out and can get back to you. This presentation is basically an Urban Renewal 101. It has some additional depth in it that, because I know some of you operate urban renewal agencies, some of you are new to urban renewal. So it will hit at a couple different levels.
It's recording, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Before I start, there are a few people online and we can't see them here because we're in screen presentation mode. But I'd like them to just introduce themselves and who they represent, and then to quickly go through here just so you all know each other, I presume, but I don't know all of you. So those online, could you unmute yourselves and just introduce yourselves, please?
I'm Jenny Jones. I'm currently a member of North Bend City Council.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Hale, and I serve position number 5 on the North Bend School Board.
Thank you.
And this is Mayor Sam Flaherty, City of Coquille.
Great.
Joshua Adamson, City of Bandon, City Council.
Okay, is there anybody else? If you can have watch to see if anybody else joins and go do that, that would be great. So if we start here and just kind of run through like a snake and introduce, that'd be great.
Sarah Stevens, Coos Bay City Councilor. Jessica Eagle, Mayor of North Bend.
Jeff Bridgens, City of North Bend.
Vince Swigert, Superintendent, North Bend School District.
Corey Couture, City Manager, Bandon.
John Sweet, Coos County Commissioner.
Mary Shamahorn, Mayor of Bandon.
June Hannahos, City Recorder of Bandon.
Drew Farmer, Coos County Commissioner. Jacob Niebergall, Coos Bay City Council.
Megan Richardson, Port of Coos Bay. Linnell Comstock, Port of Coos Bay.
Arnie Roland, School District 9, Coos Bay and the Port.
Barbara Schultz, I'm on North Bend City Council.
David Vines, City of North Bend and North Bend Urban Renewal Agency.
Roy Gant, Bandon School Board.
Todd Gergen, Coos County Urban Renewal.
Leanne Wiseman, North Bend School Board.
Michelle Roberts, North Bend School Board.
Anna Hewitt, North Bend School Board.
Lexi Woodward, South Coast Development Council.
Lamar Boyd, South Coast Development Council.
Great. I think we have a representative from each urban renewal agency in the county, so that's perfect. And I want to appreciate to you all the Ford Family Foundation for sponsoring this workshop. David Milliron put it all together. It was his idea and his leadership that allowed us to do that. So thank you to David and thank you to the Ford Family Foundation for sponsoring us. I will go through this, and at certain points, I will stop for questions about the material we have just covered. It's a pretty thorough presentation. So if you haven't seen something yet, hold that question because we'll probably cover it in a subsequent slide. And if we don't, then we have time at the end for questions also. So when I stop for questions, it's about the material we've already just previewed. She told me that this was
It's got a bit of a delay. I'll do your slides for you.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, if you fill up for it, you can actually touch, hold, swoosh.
I'm not bad. I'm so.
It'll be possible.
I'll skip that. Next slide, please. My staff and I spend a lot of time putting these presentations together and making sure they're correct. They are for you your organizations, they aren't for people who aren't here to reuse. So I just put that at the beginning. I'm happy for you to use them back at your offices in any way. Next slide. The very first thing people ask me about urban renewal is if it is a new tax. Coos County is a little interesting because you have some special levies, and I'll talk about them in a few minutes as we go through. But urban renewal itself, without those special levies, is not a new tax. It does not cause a property taxpayer to pay more money on the value of their home than if there wasn't urban renewal within your community. Coos County has the oldest urban renewal areas in the state. Because you have urban renewal areas that have been in existence a long time, you have some special features to those called special levies. And we'll talk about them in a few minutes. Those special levies can increase property taxes. So I will talk about which cities have special levies and talk about what that means in another slide. However, if you do a substantial amendment to your plan, and we'll talk about those, or do a new plan, you don't get to do any special levies anymore. And urban renewal will not impact any bonds from a school or any local option levies from a fire district. They only, any new or substantially amended plan only impacts permanent rate property tax levies, and the impact of those are on the taxing districts. Next slide. This is a little animation of how urban renewal works. So in November, when we all pay our property taxes, the county assessor's office will collect those taxes. And I don't know if you have a treasurer who disperses or your assessor disperses, but it gets dispersed out to all of your different taxing districts. That is the way our property tax collection works if we don't have urban renewal. Next slide. If you have an urban, there are only two reasons property taxes in Oregon increase. We're allowed a 3% increase every year. The assessor may increase our assessed value by 3% every year. That's not the real market value. So we have to understand there's a difference on our property tax bill between assessed value and real market value. Real market value is the value I can purportedly sell my house for. The assessed value is the value on which I have to pay taxes. That assessed value is limited to a 3% increase every year. Sometimes the assessor doesn't do that 3% increase, but typically they will because they're allowed to do that increase. You're also allowed to challenge that increase, but typically our property assessed values will go up about 3% per year. If I do a substantial rehabilitation to my house, maybe I put a whole new kitchen in or I put an addition on the back, the assessor is allowed to come back in and do a full reassessment of my property. So that can change what I pay in my property taxes. If I have a vacant piece of land and I put a new structure on that land, the assessor also will come in and do a full assessment on that property to establish the assessed value. Next slide, please. When an urban renewal area is formed within a city, the collection of those property taxes and the distribution changes. It changes only for those properties within the urban renewal area, not for the entire city. So a lot of times when I give this presentation, people are confused and they think that all properties in the city will go through this calculation method. It is only the properties within the urban renewal area that go through this initial calculation method. Next slide. So as the assessed value goes up within those areas in blue, which is your urban renewal area, the assessed value and the taxes off of that assessed value get reallocated to the urban renewal agency. The value that it was before it was formed into an urban renewal area continues going to all the other taxing districts. It is only that increase in assessed value and the taxes off of that go to the Urban Renewal Agency during the lifetime of the Urban Renewal Agency. And again, that's only for that area in the blue. That's not for the city as a whole. Next slide. So what is Urban Renewal? Urban Renewal in Oregon was established in 1957. When it was first established, it was established and used by the Housing Authority of Portland. They were the first, one of the first urban renewal agencies. And then the city of Salem's Housing Authority had an urban renewal agency. So it was initially established to allow housing authorities to increase housing. It has evolved over time. It is encoded within Oregon Revised Statutes in ORS 457. I carry around a copy of, this is my mangled copy of ORS 457. I look at this 3 or 4 times a week, even though I've done this for 20 years, because urban renewal is covered by the statute. And what we may or may not do is covered by the statute. And there are intricacies over the years from 1957 to now that have been put into what was a fairly straightforward statute at the beginning to a very convoluted statute at this point. If you go to the end of ORS 457 and start reading from like 455 on, you can do that if you have a hard time going to sleep at night, because you will not be able to understand it and it will put you to sleep. It is very difficult to understand, even as many times as I have read it. How urban renewal is working in Oregon right now is as an economic development tool. That is mainly the focus. In the recent years, probably the last 5 years, I've worked on a number of urban renewal areas that are focused on housing again. So we've come kind of full circle back to 1957, because housing, as we all know, is one of the main issues across Oregon. And there is not enough funding for housing, so urban renewal is being looked at as a potential additional funding source for housing. Urban renewal is unique in that it is a financing tool. So we can put together great downtown plans, or we can put together our comprehensive plan. We don't have financing to implement that. Our general funds do not have the resources to implement those great visions that we have in our communities. Urban renewal is that financing source that allows you to implement those plans and visions that you have for your communities. The way the statute is set up, there's someone who would like to come in.
He's on the phone and then he's gonna come in.
Okay.
Thank you. Here you go.
When we first started urban renewal, and no, I didn't help write the statute in 1957, it was used to address blighting influences. We still have to jump through that hoop whenever we do a new urban renewal plan or a substantial amendment to an urban renewal plan to say that there are blighting influences within the city to allow us to use urban renewal as a tool. That really doesn't help us any in the implementation of the plan. That is just something that's in the statute that we have to follow and have to do every time we do a substantial amendment or new urban renewal plan. Urban renewal again functions on that increase in property taxes, increase in the assessed value, and it's used all over Oregon. Next slide. So you can see it's, you know, the corridor, the I-84 corridor, up and down the coast, most main cities, and up and down I-5 across Southern Oregon, and then the bigger cities in Central Oregon. It is widely used throughout Oregon. Next slide. These are in Coos County, the urban renewal areas. So North Bend, Coos Bay has 2, Bandon has 2, Coos County has 1, and Coquille has 1. Excuse me, next slide. So why do communities decide to use urban renewal? It's because they have needs and they don't have funding, and they see urban renewal as a potential way to step in and help them. It can either be through leveraging private money so that you can get more out of a development than you might have gotten, or maybe cause a development to happen where the developer comes to you and says, I would really like to do this development, but I can't because of X financial factor. And urban renewal can step in and help. The city general funds typically lack the ability to do a project, and urban renewal provides that funding gap or source to bridge that gap. I can give you a really good example, a project that I worked on many years ago, and I think the folks here in Bandon weren't there then. But it is the Face Rock Creamery.
I was there.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been there 21 years.
Yeah, so I helped many years ago do an amendment to their plan to allow for that project to go forward. And the Urban Renewal Agency actually purchased that property, did some of the improvements, and then sold the property to the Face Rock Creamery, which we all know is a very well-established business within that community, and a really nice business at the start of or entrance to the old town. That project was spurred because of urban renewal. Next slide. So what is blight? Blight typically, it's defined in ORS 457010. It is typically underdevelopment or underuse of buildings, poor condition of buildings, inadequacy of infrastructure, including streets and utilities. Almost all of us have an inadequacy of infrastructure. Our streets, our sidewalks, our water lines, our sewer lines, our stormwater lines. Not every property has to have blight. You only have to have blight as a whole within the urban renewal area. In almost all of your communities, you have older buildings in the downtown that are in need of restoration, need of storefront improvements, need of new tenants in the downtown. So generally, I think there are like 10 different conditions of blight. These are the three that I generally use. Those are the most prevalent that we cite in the ordinance for urban renewal. Next slide. So urban renewal functions off of that income source of the increased taxes. It has expenses. Those expenses are projects, programs, and administration. It has its own budget. So the city has their budget, the Urban Renewal Agency has its own budget, and it has a spending limit that is capped by maximum indebtedness. And this is really important to understand. And I work all over the state, and it seems like every year I get a call from an Urban Renewal Agency and I'll ask them, what is your maximum indebtedness? And they don't know, which is always alarming because you may not take money from the assessor's office if you have exceeded your maximum indebtedness. So knowing what your maximum indebtedness is really important, and tracking that every year is really important. And I won't go into all of that's a whole nother hour-and-a-half session on maximum indebtedness and how to track it and what things count against it and what doesn't count against it. But if you manage an urban renewal area and don't know the maximum indebtedness or don't know how much left of that maximum indebtedness, you should find out. You should go through the process of identifying that. The maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money, projects, programs, and administration that you can spend over the life of the urban renewal area. Next slide. So this just shows, I find people learn in different ways. This shows a visual of, you start an urban renewal area, the assessor establishes the frozen base assessed value, all the property taxes off of that continue going to all the different taxing districts. Excuse me, that increment is the increased assessed value over time and the taxes off of that. A lot of times an urban renewal agency will have completed all their projects, but still have debt to pay off, because many urban renewal agencies will borrow debt to be able to pay for their projects. They finish that project, but they still have to pay that debt. And so sometimes the area will continue a few years and you've spent all of your maximum indebtedness. So all the money that's coming in is going to pay off that debt. When the Urban Renewal Agency terminates, all of that assessed value over the time frame then is released to the different taxing districts. And that amount of money should be higher than what it would have been, but for those investments by Urban Renewal. Next slide. This is just a little more nuanced slide showing that. Tiberius Solutions, who works with me on most of our projects, put together this slide for me. It shows this 3% that we know will happen regardless, unless we have, a great recession, and then sometimes that won't happen. And then it shows the projected revenue above that 3% that happens because we put in a new water line, or because we purchased a piece of property and resold it to somebody so that new development happened there, or because we increased the efficiency of the transportation system, or because we put in sidewalks, or because we put in a new park. Even though that doesn't itself increase assessed value, it increases overall living conditions that cause people to want to live in your communities. Next slide. Urban Renewal leverages the city's own tax rate. So I gave this presentation once to the League of Oregon Cities, and one of the city councilors came up to me afterwards and said, well, why can't we just do this on our own and identify this area in our city on our own and collect the taxes on our own? And I said, well, you can, but your city tax rate, city of North Bend, whoops, go back one. For you, it's higher. You are 43%. By having Urban Renewal, you get that other 57% of the overall tax rate to be able to spend within that Urban Renewal area. So you are leveraging the city's tax rate by the full tax rate that people are paying to be able to reinvest into that Urban Renewal area. Let's stop there. Does everybody understand that?
Only the increment is what you're referring to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because the money that you're paying that would have gone to the schools is now going to Urban Renewal. And the money that would have gone to the county is now going to Urban Renewal. So they are able to use that in your community. They aren't getting that money. The taxing districts aren't getting that money, but it's being used within your community on specific projects to enhance your community.
And any one of them could take advantage of that money, right? The Urban Renewal District could spend stuff in any one of those areas.
Just in the URA.
In the URA.
And they can spend it in the URA, so.
But if it was say, what's the other one up there? The art extensions, they could do something for them if it's in the URA.
They could.
Okay.
There is a remember that question when we get to 2019 legislative changes, which is a slide down, because there are some restrictions.
Yes.
Limitations. Next slide. So in all of your communities, Urban Renewal shows up on everybody's property tax bill within your city. And if it's in the county, like the port one, it shows up on everybody within the county. And a lot of times you'll get a phone call from people who will say, I am not in the Urban Renewal area. Why am I paying Urban Renewal property taxes? And you aren't. But the thing to remember about Urban Renewal is it is on the property tax bill. However, it does not increase your property tax bill. And that is hard for people to understand. Next slide. This shows a property that was valued. I did this, I think, for North Bend originally, valued at $186,000 at the point it went into an urban renewal area. Yeah, city of North Bend. The overall tax rate is 14.24. The taxes on that, when it came into the urban renewal area, was $2,653. So the next year, it's going to go up by 3%, goes up by 3%. Every taxing district gets 3% more. The overall total is 3% more. Next slide. If that had gone into the urban renewal this year, then this property tax is the next year. The next year's taxes is the same, 2,733, but that 3% increase goes to the urban renewal agency. That is just for those properties within the urban renewal area. This is the first step the assessor has to take when determining how much money the urban renewal agency will get for each urban renewal agency. For every property within the urban renewal area, the assessor has to determine what that difference is between the frozen base, the year it went into the urban renewal area, and the value now, and then add up all of those $79.61 of all of the properties, and then divide that amongst all of the property taxpayers within the city. The reason they have to do that is when measures 50 and 47 were passed, the way we did property taxes changed in Oregon, and we had the limitations. And Shiloh Inns was in an urban renewal area, and they sued the city of Portland and the Portland Development Commission. And they said, urban renewal has to be under one of those limitations, either the $5 per thousand of general government, $10 per thousand general government, $5 per thousand of education. And they won that suit, went through the whole legal system. They won that suit, and so the Department of Revenue had to get together with the assessors and decide how in the world to do urban renewal that fell within those property tax limitations. And that is when the urban renewal became an impact on taxing districts and not on property taxpayers, because they put urban renewal as an impact on each of the taxing districts under those limitations, and then spread it across the entire locality. So city of North Bend, city of Coquille, Coos County. And so somebody may not be in an urban renewal area at all, but they'll at least have Coos County urban renewal on their property tax bill, because that's countywide. And if they're in one of your cities, they'll have Coos County plus city of Coquille, or city of Bandon, or Coos Bay, or North Bend. Questions on that?
I have one. How does that contribute to compression in certain municipalities depending on what their tax rate is? Is there any?
Actually, that also is a very complex question. I do have, and I think David has it, an article on compression where I try to explain that. It's, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages long. We can make sure and send that to everybody here. Compression actually, urban renewal can help with compression in some places, and it can exacerbate compression in other cases, depending on who's causing the compression, which taxing district. An education taxing district or a general government taxing district. So it's not an easy answer to answer that question, but there are relationships. How many of you look at or know of the SAL reports that the county assessor puts out? David? So the assessor puts out, I didn't print them out. Yeah, I did. Reports every year on urban renewal. The ones, 4A is a report on every taxing district. So the city, the county, the cemetery district, everybody. 4B is on urban renewal. C, D, and E are all on urban renewal. They're on their website under SAL reports. And the 4E reports list compression within those reports. So you can look at, there's a summary for each urban renewal area. You can look at that summary for each urban renewal area and look at the amount of compression within that urban renewal area to help answer that specifically. I doubt North Bend has much compression because they are under the 15 limit. $10 for general government, $5 for education. Cities that experience compression are usually over this limit. They're like 17 or 18. In Portland, it's $21 per thousand. So generally, if your property tax rate is under 15 per thousand, you have very little compression. And that compression handout will help you because it gives you an example of a house, of two houses and how compression affects each one. Next slide. So property taxes and urban renewal, the assessor first has to calculate how much TIF there should be. They do that by looking at every property. They then distribute that citywide, the impact of that to all property tax bills, and that is collected by the assessor's office. Can you go back one, please? If the urban renewal ended this year, their property tax bill doesn't go down. It's just redistributed to the other taxing districts. So people who say, I want urban renewal to end so that my property taxes will go down. No, that won't happen. It'll just go back to the other taxing districts. Next slide. Next slide. So the impacts of urban renewal are on property taxing districts. A lot of times growth in a community wouldn't have happened but for the projects that have been done with urban renewal. So if you're able to put in a transportation route or a water capacity upgrade or anything like that, that allows development to happen that otherwise wouldn't have happened, that is caused because urban renewal has been able to fund that. Next slide. Schools are a little different, and we do have some school representatives here. And we did, my staff and I, a pretty detailed look at schools, but it's been like 6 or 7 years ago, where we put together about 10 slides that showed the different processes and steps of the state school fund, which is in itself very convoluted. We say urban renewal has an indirect impact on schools. Next slide. For regular taxing districts like the city or the county, it's a direct impact on that taxing district. They just don't get that money straightforward like that. Next slide. This is, or was, when we did this in 2015, the state school fund. So the state school fund is what the amount of money in the state school fund is allocated on a per pupil basis across the state. Every district gets that base allocation, and then they get a little more if they have certain conditions within their school district. Urban renewal impacts that state school fund up here, where the amount of local property taxes that go into that fund are less than they would have been if that urban renewal area did not exist. However, it looks like we have some chats. So at the end of this slide, let's look at the chats and see if there are questions there. If urban renewal didn't exist and that money went here and comes through here, we don't know what will happen to the state school fund. We don't know if all of those resources then are used by the legislature, or the legislature doesn't take money from other sources, they have other sources. When we talk about it, the language that we've used is that the legislature backfills that state school fund to be able to meet that per pupil ratio. We may not be happy about that per pupil ratio. And I know a lot of us would like to see that go up. That's out of our control. That is in the legislature's control. Whether or not the legislature would decide to allocate more money, if that didn't exist, if that existed, we don't know the answer to that. All we can say is schools are indirectly impacted because they are funded through the state school fund on a per pupil basis. So they don't, it's not a direct impact where we say, okay, North Bend, you have urban renewal, and so your kids are going to get X amount less each year because you have urban renewal. That doesn't happen. Urban renewal in Portland or Pendleton or North Bend or Coos Bay impacts the state school fund and the amount of money that goes there. Any questions on that?
Well, there are 3 school districts in which it does directly impact. Because there are 3 school districts who don't get any state school funding.
Oh, timber.
And so those school districts are fully paid by their timber tax and the state and their property tax. And so in those 3, they lose a little bit of money because of urban renewal. But we are not in any school district that happens to.
And even that's gonna change because they're reducing timber harvest.
That will eventually.
Yeah,
It'll
yeah,
catch up, but right now,
right,
for all the purposes here, the equalization takes care of the schools.
right. And people ask me, well, what happens if the state school fund changes? And I say, well, I don't know the answer to that, right? I can't predict the answer to that. The state school fund's been like that for a number of years. There's always pressure to increase the amount of allocations in the state school fund. Whether or not there are resources that the legislature decides to allocate is really outside of our control. That is a political decision. And whether or not we terminated all urban renewal in Coos County, and that would help anybody, there is not a yes answer to that. Next slide.
Was there a question?
Yes.
You said,
Oh, yeah, a couple of questions on the past. Thank you.
Will you go over how school district funding is backfilled by the states? And it sounds like the state will repay school districts for taxes diverted to urban renewal districts. School funding measure is an enrollment, but repayment from URA is part of Oregon law. Is that right?
I cannot say that Oregon law requires repayment to the state school fund for urban renewal funds that are taken. That is not required. The legislature is required through the equalization formula to establish a per pupil amount that is negotiated with all of the different school districts, and the legislature is required to find those monies to pay for that. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there's no connection between urban renewal and the state school fund.
That's correct.
None at all. It's just, they're separate completely.
That's correct.
The answer is the state decides how much they're gonna pay every school district for every child.
Right.
And that is not affected by any of the other things.
Right.
We did pass Student Success Act, which gave another $2 billion because they set up a whole nother tax that goes to schools. So, but the school district's budget is based solely on the number of students that you have. And the amount that this legislature has decided they're gonna pay.
Right.
But at the same time, these revenues are counted as local revenues for a school district.
Right,
And if a school district has an increased amount of local revenue, then the state of Oregon decreases
Right.
the amount they give us
That's right.
on a
Right.
per student basis.
right,
And so the URA would decrease the amount of local revenue a school district receives. And so, so the state of Oregon will backfill that
Right.
amount. So in essence, it becomes a wash
right,
for school districts.
Right.
If URA exists or doesn't.
right,
Actually, from the standpoint of the school district, other places in Oregon are paying ours, if we have a urban renewal district, other places in the state are paying that through income tax.
Right.
So income tax is paying that, and so who pays more income tax? Larger areas, so oftentimes I like to say finally, instead of us and timber tax paying for Oregon public schools in Portland, public people in Portland are paying income tax that equalize ours.
right. Next one, please, and we can get rid of the chat, I think. There are limitations on how much urban renewal a city can have. All of your cities are under 50,000 in population, so your limitations are you may have up to 25% of your assessed value in an urban renewal area and up to 25% of your acreage in an urban renewal area. If you have an existing plan, you may not increase the acreage of that plan by more than 20% of its original, regardless of whether you take some acreage out. So if your original acreage was 100 acres, you may only add 20 additional acres. Even though you had 100 acres, you took out 20 and now you want to put that 20 back in and add another 20, you don't get to do that. So if you take acreage out, that doesn't mean you get to add that back into the amount of acreage that you can have in that urban renewal area. The legislature put that provision in because they didn't want urban renewal moving around the city and staying alive and just moving everywhere around the city. The limitation on acreage was caused by the city of Lincoln City, who when they did their first urban renewal area, decided they wanted the entire city in urban renewal. and that got taken care of pretty quickly.
So if you started out and you have 25% of your assessed value of property in the city, and it turns out to be 25% of your acreage of the city, so you've got this one up. And then because of the urban renewal, it grows. And so the next time you look at it, it's 25% of the acreage, but it's now 30% of the value. Do you have to adjust?
No,
Okay.
but you can't do another urban renewal area, right?
That's it.
Until you close that one. Right. And then increasing your maximum indebtedness. So remember that maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money that you can spend on projects and programs. An urban renewal agency may increase that through a substantial amendment by 20% of the original maximum indebtedness as adjusted annually for inflation. They may increase it by more than that 20% if they get concurrence of 75% of the taxing districts who are impacted by that urban renewal area. The acreage limitation may not be overridden. The maximum indebtedness one may be if you get concurrence from 75% of the other taxing districts. I've done that across the state. It's usually because there is a project that everybody knows needs to happen for one reason or the other. And the taxing districts see that as a need in the community and say, yes, we're supportive of that happening. Yes?
Is that a vote of the people or just
The board.
Boards.
The board. By resolution of the board. Next slide. We keep talking about plan adoption and substantial amendment. This is the process you have to go through to either do a new urban renewal plan or do a substantial amendment to a plan. A substantial amendment is when you increase the acreage over 1% of the original acreage or you increase the maximum indebtedness. You have to allow for public involvement in all phases of this. It has to go to the Urban Renewal Agency, who will review either the plan or the substantial amendment, and then decide to send that on out for formal public review. That formal public review is a presentation to the county. The county only gets a vote if there's unincorporated property within the urban renewal area, or you're asking for concurrence for something. It goes to the Planning Commission for review of conformance with the comprehensive plan. And then it goes to the City Council for a hearing and vote on a non-emergency ordinance. That process takes about a minimum of 6 months. You have to redo all of the blight findings. If you're doing a substantial amendment, you have to redo all the financial analysis. So it is not an easy process. It is a time-consuming and lengthy process to do, and allows for public input at all phases. Questions on that?
Who pays for that process?
Usually the agency who is asking for either the plan or the substantial amendment.
Not the Urban Renewal Agency.
Yes, the agency,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
Next slide. Annual reports. Annual reports are not annual financial statements. So if you're doing your annual financial statements, just like you do for your city, and you think that you are therefore meeting the requirement to do annual reports, you are not. Annual reports are required by ORS 457.460. They have to include very specific information that's within that statutory reference. It has to detail your expenditures from the prior year and revenues, your budget for the next fiscal year, the impacts on each taxing district. It must state what your maximum indebtedness is, the amount that you used that prior year. It doesn't say you have to say how much is remaining, but for everyone that I work on, and I do about 25 of them a year, I ask the clients to put that information in because I think it's helpful for the other taxing districts to have an idea of how much is remaining. It has to be sent to each impacted taxing district. So you have to send a copy of it out to all the taxing districts, and you have to place a notice in the newspaper that it is available. If you're not doing annual reports, it is a statutory requirement and you should start doing them. There is no body that checks those, right? There's nobody that fines you for not doing it. However, it's required by the statute. It is a best practice. It is something you should be doing if you're not. Next slide. I'm going to start talking a little bit about projects. Do we want anybody to ask any questions over anything that we've gone over so far before we talk about projects? No? Online?
I'm not seeing.
Okay.
I do have a question, Elaine.
Yes.
Excuse me. That has to do with the what maximum indebtedness really is. Back here somewhere it says it's the maximum you can spend. If you were to spend and paid off the debt.
Paying off the debt is different.
So it's the maximum amount you can borrow. But couldn't you spend more than you borrow?
That's a great question, and it's very intricate. So maximum indebtedness does not include interest on debt. So if an urban renewal agency borrows $2 million and repays that $2 million is taken off their maximum indebtedness at the point that it's borrowed. So if they had a $15 million maximum indebtedness, they borrow $2 million. They now have $13 million left of their maximum indebtedness. They then can take that $2 million and spend it on their projects and their programs. They're also paying debt. That debt that they're paying doesn't get counted against their maximum indebtedness, or you'd be counting things twice. And by statutory definition, interest on maximum indebtedness, interest on borrowing is not counted against maximum indebtedness. So great question. you can pay off and spend all your project money. Remember that one graph? And I said, and then you're left over here paying off debt. You can still keep getting those tax increment revenues to make those debt payments because that's not part of the maximum indebtedness.
So
Want to follow up?
a little bit, please.
Yeah.
So pay down the principal 2 million, you did. That affects your maximum authority, because you paid it down or not.
No, the effect on your maximum authority happens at the point you borrow that money. Way up here. You borrow the $2 million.
Ways, you always have to count towards the limit, even if you pay off, retire that debt.
Right. It's not like a Visa card, right? That you pay that down and get to reborrow. Once you borrow that money,
It's done.
it's done. So not every urban renewal agency borrows loans, right? Some of them do what's called pay as you go. So they get in those tax revenues and they have a street project and they use those tax revenues to do that street project. Bond counsel has given the opinion that if you enter into a contract to do your street project, that is incurring debt. So that's an okay use of tax increment funds. Your finance director then has to track things more closely because he or she has to know what of your expenditures is being counted against your maximum indebtedness and what isn't. Whereas if you borrow $2 million, that's automatically taken off, comes over here to your project fund, and you spend out of your project fund and you don't have to worry about the impact on maximum indebtedness. So some people, Coos Bay does du jour borrowing, which is really smart because it cleans that money. It takes it as debt every year. They get in their tax increment proceeds. They do an overnight loan, cleans that money, gets counted against their maximum indebtedness, comes over here to their project fund, then they can just spend that money. It's a complicated system, and we work with finance directors a lot on helping them understand how to track this. Highberry Solutions or I are usually at every annual conference of the finance directors to try to give a presentation to try to help people understand. There's no training, unfortunately, for finance directors from the Department of Revenue or Oregon League of Cities. So I'll get a call from a finance director who will say, well, I've inherited this urban renewal program and I don't know what in the world they were doing and I don't know what to do. And so we end up giving them training and help them figure it out. And a lot of times that means going 15 years back in their records and trying to reconstruct what happened.
So once you've reached your maximum indebtedness, the urban renewal group is done basically, because they can't take any more money. Now they can continue to pay, because money will still come on, so the debt and all that kind of pay. So when do we get to restart? Do you have to do an amendment, or you just in that urban renewal district and start a new one?
So Urban Renewal District A, Lincoln City. Lincoln City had a downtown urban renewal area, the year 2000 area, reached its maximum indebtedness, closed down that area, continued paying off debt. Debt gets all paid off. All those resources are now given to all the different taxing districts from that district. They have now started a new district in a new area with a new frozen base, a new maximum indebtedness, new projects for that new area.
But you do a major amendment though with the existing one under the limits, but that's limited in effect.
It's limited by that 20% as adjusted by inflation, or if you get concurrence for a higher amount. 75% of the taxing districts who levy, who are being impacted by that urban renewal area.
generally speaking, and in that, this North Bend example, North Bend and the school district just about do it.
North Bend School District Port. Do we need the county? We need North Bend School District, the port, and the city of Bend.
That's what I was saying. Doesn't take all of them, just take
Right.
75% of the
Right.
amount each one gets.
That's right. So of that overall tax rate that we showed on that big chart that had everybody's tax rate,
Clearly though, if either North Bend or the school district decided not to, it's over.
then you're done.
So if it's over, can you just start over?
If that urban renewal area is over, they've reached their maximum indebtedness. First of all, they could go back to just getting the maximum indebtedness that their city council themselves would approve. Right? They can do that. Or they can decide they're gonna start over, so they could terminate that district and do a new district either in the same area or a different area.
And the other way is, if they have one that's going and they don't approve it 1 year, they could approve it the next year.
Yes.
That's.
If you start as your district, you still have to have concurrence, just like.
If you start, excuse me, if you start a new district, you do not need concurrence from anyone. A new district, the city council or county commission, if it's within the county, may start a new district on their own without concurrence. Yes.
So thank you for being here and for this training. I always learn a little something new each time. And it's so hard to, you know, when people are interested in this, they don't often want to sit down for a 2-hour training. So I try to explain it in like short bits to them. And with the maximum indebtedness, you know, you made the comment about like, it's not like a credit card that just you pay off a little bit and you get more. And I think that's a confusing spot for many. I've tried to explain it and tell me if this comes off wrong. But when that original maximum indebtedness was set, that's the amount that like, okay, here's how much you can borrow up on these projects until there's an amendment later. But if it's increased, in a sense, it's like you're borrowing against yourself, because then you're paying it off as that the increments come in. Does that sound like a digestible way for people to understand that, or am I off on anything there?
If you increase it and you spend that money, you are repaying that money from the proceeds of the area. So what you're saying is essentially true, yes.
Kind of borrowing it from yourself,
right?
Okay.
Right. However, if you were a taxing district, if you were the county and they heard you say that, they're saying, no, who you're really borrowing from is all of us other taxing districts.
Right.
And I say, well, not all, since the school gets backfilled at the airport and county, and then go into the whole, brings up the value of everything in the area.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all, I try to be really honest about all this because obviously I would not be doing urban renewal for 20 years if I didn't think it was a fantastic tool to use. But I do know it has impacts on counties and indirectly, you know, the school district funding, it is difficult to explain. I don't think it has impacts on them, but it's difficult to explain. Urban renewal is the most complex thing to explain of any of our, you know, different taxations. There are some cities that require votes on urban renewal, and they'll bring me in to try to help explain what it is and how it works to the constituent, right? That's really hard to put together, you know, a 100-word soundbite on why urban renewal is good for a community. And you're right, typically all boats rise if you're able to invest in your community. But
can you explain why I'd rather have an existing urban renewal than to stop an urban renewal and like restart it again?
yeah. And you go way back to, I had a graph.
The 25%.
Have a graph with a bar across the bottom.
Yeah.
Because you're not using it, must have.
Here, or here. When you start a new urban renewal area, this is the amount of revenue that you get for years.
Okay.
It's nothing, right? It's nothing based on something,
So when I
right?
start over again, I start back kind of at not zero, but like just like not getting as much money.
All right, and there is a way to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. The statute was amended, I forget which amendment it was, to allow something called, it's not revenue sharing, it's, David, what's it called when you can share with other taxing districts?
Revenue sharing?
No,
Or your
it's called something. And the way that works is you can tell every year you fill out a UR-50 form for the assessor. Under levy. Under levy is the name of it. You can tell the assessor that you want to take less than the total amount that's due to your agency. The city of Wilsonville did that permanently on 2 of their different urban renewal districts because they did not want to close them down yet because they were getting a lot of money out of them. But they were willing to share some of that money with other taxing districts. So their city councils, and this is done through the city council, not the urban renewal agency, and a lot of times that's the same, but it's not always. Determined that they would do a permanent under levy. So they would share a permanent X amount with all the other taxing districts, as long as they could keep getting this amount instead of coming back to this amount, right? So yeah, that is a way to affect that.
So, but keep that.
Keep that? Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted a quick question. So like going on with her. So if you renew it instead of starting over, where do you start? Do you start up there at the top? Or do you start in the, I mean, how do
You renew it?
So like if, like what Ben's trying to do, does it start there?
Yep.
It starts right where you left off.
Mhm.
And you just have higher debt, and that's why it just keeps going up.
Yep.
They get a whole bunch more money.
Well, I know that, I just didn't know that, how much.
Right.
However, North Bend has no debt. So that's a very important that we have spent that over all those years on infrastructure of the community.
So it's down to zero.
We have no debt.
Right.
And so it would be the increment that we would be using for future projects.
So the 11 million that you took out originally had all been spent and paid back.
Yes, you have your downtown streetscapes, you have all of those improvements, infrastructure, all of that in the community and that did.
Okay.
I think the reality is there's a little bit left.
Yeah. But our annual report is showing that our max, like we're getting close to the end
Right.
of that money.
Right.
So the question becomes, can we get, is it the 25% more or is it 20% more?
20% or.
Yeah.
Those are great questions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So could you use that as a bargaining tool? I know when we went for the 75%, Coos County thought wasn't there, or maybe it was, maybe they supported us, but Coos County did not support us.
Right.
So could we have used that as a bargaining tool to say, we will give you X percentage of the money, of the increment?
You could. You could. You have to look at how you're going to spend that money and whether you need it for the project, and you can really afford to do that or not.
But without their help, we wouldn't have had it at all. So
That's right. That's right. So I've helped negotiate these in different places around the state. And in some places, the other taxing districts have said, no, we don't want you to under levy. We want you to go ahead because we know it'll be a shorter time frame.
right.
If you under levy, it's going to extend it longer and you're still going to be around longer. And we would rather you get in, do your project, get this thing over with and move on. So there are different things, to consider. On the other hand, sometimes a county is in a place where they need revenue. And so. Sometimes, yeah. And unfortunately, I really feel with our property tax system, it's many counties that are feeling that. It's not just isolated. Lamar.
I was actually wondering here in Oregon, how do you calculate your maximum indebtedness? Or if there's a limit based on your size or if you come around.
Well,
On the front end, when you develop your plan.
yes. So if, I know some of you have had access to this report, which was the report that went with the North Bend substantial amendment. And in this report, there are a bunch of financial tables. These were for an increase in the maximum indebtedness, not the original. But typically, at the beginning, we're working with a city and we will do what's called a feasibility study with them. And we'll say, what's your boundary area? And from that boundary area, we'll look at a 20, 25, and 30-year plan. And we'll say, from that area, we'll do financial projections based upon X amount of growth within that area over time and any known growth. So I'm working with a community up in Northeast Oregon that has a data center coming in, right? Well, that known growth is, we would love to have that known growth here, I can tell you that. But typically in a community like this, there isn't a whole lot of known growth, right? There's some, but there's not a lot that's going to move that needle a lot. So we do those projections and then we look at the amount of money that it says that you'll be able to get over that time period. And we'll look at the project list that they say they want to do, and we'll try to balance those and balance the temperament of the community with that.
So speaking of just kind of anticipating growth and things like that, and trying to kind of get an understand of not just the URA in this area, but really the whole state, is this, it seems like it's a good mechanism to keep the tax dollars local and not sending them up to the state. I think Arnie Roland, former Senator Arnie Roland made a comment about that. Is that just kind of isolated to us and because where we're at with our population growth? Because that seems to me like one of the biggest advantages is keeping those tax dollars here. Is that unique to us on the coast?
No, I've heard that said in the last month in 3 different meetings.
Okay.
I don't say that. I agree with it, but I would rather you all say that, right? But yeah, everybody feels that way.
Okay.
Well, Portland doesn't always. Just saying.
But yeah.
Portland's not a local call.
That's true, but I'm just saying, as a local, Portland, a local Portland person.
No, we're doing really well. It's 3:10, so we have lots of time. Are there more financial?
Well, this
Commissioner
is
Swart,
probably
go
not financial. Explaining to people that don't like urban renewal districts.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to say that really it's not increasing your taxes. They don't believe me ever.
They don't believe you.
But at least I could say that. What I find more difficult to explain away is the fact that the reason for the objection, like, I don't believe in urban renewal because I voted for this tax rate for this taxing entity and this tax rate for this taxing entity. I did not vote to take part of that from those taxing entities and give it to this one over here. And I have a hard time responding to that.
So do I. I don't have an answer to that.
True.
You know,
My only answer to that is the Oregon revised statute allows urban renewal. And that is the way urban renewal is set up to function.
and what they're after is changing.
They may be, but I don't have the authority to change that.
I know you don't.
I know you don't, but you know, when people ask that, we all have to deal within the system we have right now. This is the system we have right now. So does it work for our communities? It works really well for many communities. Does it have an impact on other taxing districts? It does have an impact on other taxing districts. Can all that be balanced for the greater good for everybody? Will the end result be better for everybody? And that's why, and community by community, that question gets answered. Let's go back here and then come back to you.
The only thing I would ever say to is that if, in my opinion, goes back to science, you're either growing or you're dying in any community. And urban renewal deals are the only tool that we have in the rural areas to grow. Again, it may affect each little district, but it is really the only place that there is additional money added into the formula to grow your community. If every one of the individual districts got what they got, they would continue to do what they're doing, but everybody would fall behind. In my opinion.
But that leads to the next question. And that is, there are a few districts like the county that every urban renewal district impacts us, everyone.
Right.
North Bend, Coos Bay, Bandon, everywhere it happens. That doesn't happen to very many taxing districts. And the port would be more, you're not counted right.
We are trying to count it.
Is it
No county wide.
over the tops of some of the other port districts?
What? No.
No, we wouldn't be. No, just go there.
So you're not counted right.
Right, they're not county wide.
Yeah.
Coquille River Board of.
Yeah.
So to that point, this is the next slide.
So at any rate. Sure. I mean, I like the idea of, it, but it's, boy, I tell you, representing the county, sometimes with the dire straits we are in, it is really difficult to know. You're taking collectively 7% of our tax revenues, and you're coming back for more.
Yeah.
And we're releasing prisoners on the street because we can't keep the jail open.
Second most dangerous.
Is there any, this is on the purpose of this, is there any way we could change this so that if you have an entity like a county that's impacted by everyone, there could be an adjustment made?
So hold that thought a minute.
Okay,
I'll come back to it.
thank you.
I had something really smart up here that I was gonna say. At the very beginning, and I think this kind of flew over everybody, but I'm gonna bring you back to it. I said, you have the oldest urban renewal areas in the state. Now, why do you think you have the oldest urban renewal areas in the state? That is because your growth in this county is really small. If your growth was bigger, those urban renewal areas would have reached their maximum indebtedness, closed down, started a new area, and gone on. So yes, I mean, Urban Renewal has done great things. There, you know, you've got your Face Rock Creamery, you have in Coos Bay, the theater that you've done. I mean, there are a number of storefront loans and grants and infrastructure and along the boardwalk and just a lot of things that would not have happened if you didn't have Urban Renewal. And, you know, in Coos Bay, your new development, your new, those would not have happened without the ability of Urban Renewal to assist with them.
But I think the problem is that, in fact, just as we were driving in, I think it was the man from Bandon that built most of that, the guy that built the Face Rock Creamery. And some parts of it doesn't really fit into the overall look of Coos Bay. So it's hard when we don't. The statistics just came out that Coos Bay is the second most dangerous town because of the crime. And when we don't have a jail, we have all these new fancy buildings, and I can understand how they feel when safety is so impacted by their inability to fund the
It
jail.
wouldn't feel quite that way if the city didn't complain. We listen to you.
And I think, you know, in small communities, it's always a balancing act, right? And I can come in and tell you what you can legally do, and I can tell you, well, the statute allows you to do this and allows you to do that. But that negotiating within, trying to see how can we solve our current problems? What can we do to try to jumpstart our economy? How can we create more jobs? And then offsetting that with your social issues, you know, those are tough questions. But those are all local questions, right? That you all sit down together and try to resolve. And this just shows what Commissioner Sweet was talking about. This is all of the urban renewal areas in Coos County. I got this from those assessors reports that I cited earlier in the meeting, the Sal 4 reports. So you can see that the impact, now this isn't all impact on the county has a portion of that total impact, but there are impacts.
So where is the Coos County urban renewal?
Pardon me?
No, where is it? Where's the
It's
location?
not as bad.
Oh,
We always think of it as the port.
I know.
That's why we did.
And,
That's
yeah.
what I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure that.
In Oregon, ports don't have authority to
Right.
form urban renewal areas. I'm doing quite a bit of work in Washington right now.
They do.
In 2021, they enacted new, they call it tax increment. And they did give ports the authority to form tax increment areas. But in Oregon, it has to be formed either by the county or the city. By the ordinance. Yes.
Do you ever do work on, like, to the point of Commissioner Sweet about, hey, every dollar counts right now?
But let's not interrupt, please.
So, we're all these, everybody's in a situation where every dollar counts, and I feel like it would be very easy though, to like show what happens when you have things like in these blighted areas with improvements and, housing, how that can directly benefit a school with having, more students in the area that have housing, or in the county, how this will directly, it's not a big leap to say if you improve this area, everybody in the county does better. The airport district, when you have a place that people want to visit, it becomes a place that people want to live, a place that people want to invest in.
Right.
So it's not, is that work that you do as a consultant to be able to say, like, with this type of investment, here is some projections of how it will improve your property value and the overall tax rate for everybody.
There are
I
consultants.
explained that to the 20 people with 8 offices. In part because we don't have, not all of that came from this.
Right.
But a part of it.
If we want to keep
That's the
employing anybody though, that's, we have to,
Right.
you either grow or you die. I mean,
There are consultants who do that kind of economic analysis. It's usually the big Portland firm. And I'm really careful here because this is being recorded.
No, that's what worries me too.
That's all I'm gonna say. I don't do that myself. Although, I have sat down with different taxing districts and just started negotiating. Let's talk about this and let's solve this. And I'm a good problem solver. That's always been in my DNA. So trying to help people figure out how to get to the better good, that's something that I do.
There's a comment in chat. Stephanie says, I disagree with Mary. Improvements bring people, businesses, living spaces, and other positive activity to a district. Economic development spurs activity that replaces the nefarious activity. Does it make it go away? No.
As far as the crime rate.
Yeah. There was a question that I received prior, as I was preparing, that talked about, okay, if you expend all this money in urban renewal and we still have the houseless. And I have to tell you, that question for me comes up in every single community I work in. It can be Pendleton or LeGrand or Grants Pass or Klamath Falls. It is a statewide issue. It is an issue. I'm working with Pendleton on doing a 5-year action plan for their urban renewal area. And the very first part of that 5-year action plan is working cooperatively with the other agencies, because urban renewal has very little it can do. Urban renewal is for capital expenditures. So they can maybe put public restrooms in. They can assist with low income, which is not the verbiage to use anymore. They can assist with housing, temporary housing, transitional housing. They can do capital expenditures. Much of the response to houseless people is outside of their purview. And it's something that, you know, everybody has to step into.
Yeah, I'm happy for homelessness causes, you know, not to take up your time, but the mental health system in Oregon is a huge component. So when we did a study earlier this year, for the point in time now, we had 11 homeless in the jail, 10 of them were on mental health meds. The 11th probably needed them. And then the housing aspect, which from an urban renewal standpoint, I think there is a role to play because you can build the street infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, the lighting systems with the urban renewal so that it is appealing for a developer that comes along. Of course, we're on the North Spit, nobody's gonna live there, but hey, it can help the cities. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough issue, and if I knew how to resolve that, I'd be earning much more than what I earned as a urban renewal consultant. It's a really very complicated issue. And urban renewal is a very tiny part of solving that.
I know, for example, you mentioned Bandon. We have a general property tax rate of 46 cents a thousand. Everybody else here in North Bend has over 6. I mean, there's lots. If we had not had access to urban renewal, half of the things that you see in Bandon, whether it's down on the port and we've shared money for the boardwalk, those things wouldn't have happened. And I think that because of what we've done down there, we bring people into the entire county. So I think it helped everyone. And that's what you said about floating all boats. Yeah.
We wouldn't have an airport if it wasn't for.
Well, for Bandon Dunes,
yeah,
think of Bandon Dunes and what they've done to the county for the money. Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Second largest property taxpayer in the county.
This was just to show you information on your urban renewal areas within Coos County. And that all of your property taxing districts are impacted by each of those urban renewal areas. I was in one meeting with Commissioner Sweet and Farmer where they were saying they had more urban renewal areas than many other counties. And if you go back and look at the map that I had of the whole coast, or urban renewal, most cities who are doing good planning and figuring out where they want to go are using urban renewal as an implementation tool. So when you look at that map and you go to a great city in Oregon, you say that was a great trip. You go up to Astoria and you go to the theater and the Garden of Surging Waves and you eat at the Blue Scorcher Bakery. That's all urban renewal, right?
In your experience, have you ever seen someone use an urban renewal area, that partnership as a way to create that public-private partnership to get those things done? Kind of as a way of, kind of like, hey, we're looking to get this done. We need 10 million. We'll set it in and here's how we pay it back.
Right.
I mean,
That's exactly what the Facebook Creamery is in Bandon.
It wouldn't be there if we paid $500,000 for the property for Tillamook.
Right.
And it would not be there today if we not done that.
Right.
North Bend has several public-private partnerships right now because the city council and the urban renewal agency wanted to generate certain things. For instance, like they wanted a local breweries. They wanted to be able to attract folks, spend money in our community, which helps folks stay at the hotels, which then generates TLT. So yes, there's a lot of things that are public-private partnerships. The North Bend Hotel is another perfect example of a public-private partnership that started that way.
Next slide.
So in that chart, excess value is the amount that it's grown in those urban.
Yes.
So if you added up that whole column, that's the amount of money that is not being taxed to the county.
That's correct.
Which is a pretty good sized number.
Yes. So Coos Bay, one has a special levy and North Bend has a special levy. Bandon used to do something with a street levy and
85 cents a thousand.
yeah. but that's not an urban renewal levy, and they had said, I mean, it's been a number of years since they've worked with Bandon, but they said that they wouldn't do the urban renewal levy as long as.
Voters would let us, it was the water part of the borders.
Right, right.
At least we had, I think one of the big problems is the newspaper. It used to be, we all had, pretty functioning newspapers. It's hard when you have maybe one person, we have a person, he happens to live in Bandon, but he's impacted every district, every county with his negativity and doesn't have any, reasoning for it, but he just hates urban renewal and he attacks us repeatedly. And you don't have any way to combat that.
Get some attention.
Hmm?
I say it gets some attention.
Yeah, well, he came up to me the other day and gave me the finger, right? And I was sitting in a car in front of a grocery store and he walked right up to me. I mean, he's frightening. He frightens me.
Mayor,
I've had him removed.
Mayor, he was just telling you that you're number one in Bandon.
Yeah, I will say, Mayor Bandon, I do feel like I'm so thankful that everybody came to this today. Because like I said, I learn something new every single time and it is hard to share this. So I'm hoping that everybody here today will disseminate all this information and because the myths that we hear all the time, like, oh, I'm on it too. I get every time the property taxes go out, I get like, 10 to 15 phone calls that day. Because they're like, I thought I wasn't in URA. So there's all these. So I'm hoping that this group here will share out the facts to these people that have like all the misinformation.
Right. I gave this presentation to the North Bend City Council. It's been almost a year ago. And they were so appreciative. And I heard afterwards that they were at meetings and somebody would say something about urban renewal and they go, no, that's not how that works. And felt comfortable enough to be able to step in and explain. And I'm really proud when I can actually do because it is so complicated that I can do a presentation that people can go away from it and feel like they have the tools to be able to give the right information. So if North Bend does a substantial amendment to increase their maximum indebtedness, their special levy goes away. So they will no longer be able to collect that urban renewal special levy that is now collected.
But if it ends, it also goes away, right?
That's
a special levy, just
That's
there's a
correct.
kind component.
That's correct. Next slide. I think these will only confuse people except when you're filling out your UR50 form, you have to say what kind of plan you are. And there are lots of different kinds of urban renewal plans as from 1957 to now, we have gone through different amendments. You can just keep this information, but most of you are reduced rate plans, which means you don't get money from bonds or local option levies. You only get money from permanent rate levies of other taxing districts. Next slide. Perfect. So this also just tells you different kinds of plans. Next slide. Yeah. That's what we all feel like when we're trying to figure out what kind of urban renewal plan you are and what you're getting your property taxes from. Next slide. So this is from the assessor's information again, except Coquille, everybody's in option 1 plan. You're all reduced rate plans. So you are not getting any money from any school district bonds or any local option levies. The 2 cities are getting those special levies, but other than that, it's just permanent rate plans. Any questions on those? Next slide. If you ever formed a new district, you would be called a permanent rate plan. That's a new definition among all those other definitions.
How many options, is that rural option 1? How many options?
There were, those options came up when measures 50 and 47 were passed.
Okay.
And each urban renewal agency had to pick whether they wanted to be an option 1, 2, or 3 plan, and how their property taxes were calculated were based on which plan they picked.
Okay.
Option 1, 2, or 3.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the North Bend, it shows that the maximum indebtedness is still 2.5. So if it was passed and if we passed the 45 2.5 million, is the 2.5 added on top of that, or is it subtracted from that?
That 2.5 was as of fiscal year in 2024, so a year ago. It's less than that now. And that 45 basically will be what they have as they move forward. Everything's kind of accounted for at this point and will be spent in the next fiscal year. So whatever increase they do is the amount that they'll be subtracting from in the future. I didn't have everybody's information. I just had those whose annual reports I could either pull up or whose annual reports I've done before and was able to access quickly, but these are what the maximum indebtedness is of each, and then how much MI was used to 2024 and how much is remaining. And again, that was fiscal year in 2024, so that's a year old. Everybody, the annual reports cover the prior fiscal year. Next slide. Your plans will have an amendment section. Substantial amendments are required by statute, and they are typically only increasing acreage beyond 1% and increasing your maximum indebtedness. Some plans added in other things, some of the older plans especially. So whenever you want to do an amendment, you should go to your amendment section of your plan and figure out for sure what kind of amendment is, and therefore what kind of process is required. Council approved amendments were put in a lot of plans by a consultant who no longer is doing urban renewal work, but he did a lot of work along the coast. So some of you may have a council approved amendment within your plan also. So you should just make sure when you're doing an amendment that you check that section and see if you do. I only put that in a plan now if the council is different from the Urban Renewal Agency. So sometimes the Urban Renewal Agency is comprised of people who are not all city council members. And therefore, if they're going to make a change in projects, I feel like that city council also needs to know that. So I'll put in the plan that it has to be done through a council amendment also. But if the agency and the city council are one and the same, it doesn't, to me, make a lot of sense to have a council approved amendment because they're already approving it as the agency. So I've taken that out of a lot of plans where your city council is the same as the agency board. And minor amendments are everything that's not council approved or a substantial amendment. So if you're adding a project or changing a goal and objective or anything that's not a maximum indebtedness increase or adding acreage, it's a minor amendment done by resolution of the agency. Next slide. Duration provisions. Most urban renewal plans do not have a duration provision. Some have. Some say this plan will last for 30 years. This plan will expire and it has a specific date. So you should check your plan and see if it has a duration provision or not. Usually duration is determined by when you reach your maximum indebtedness. So that is the controlling feature of urban renewal plans in Oregon. And when you've paid off all your debt. Next slide. In 2019, there were some specific changes to Oregon urban renewal legislation, and one of those was taxing districts were upset about the use of urban renewal for new city halls, for libraries, for police stations, for your own administrative infrastructure, because they felt like their tax dollars should not be spent for your public building. I agree with that. We negotiated a provision within the statute that if you're going to include a public building project within your plan, that you have to get approval of 3 of the top 4 taxing districts to be able to move forward with the project. The reason we do that is we never hear from the Mosquito District. or the community colleges, or, you know, the smaller districts, there would be no way we would be able to get them to decide they want to vote on anything. And the other major taxing districts agreed with that. So if you're putting a public building in your plan, so we were talking a little earlier about, can you do things for other taxing districts? Well, you may, but if it's not already in your plan, you'll have to get concurrence to do that. We clarified the adding of land to an urban renewal area, made more requirements on the annual reports. We added that maximum indebtedness requirement because we found too many agencies forgot about the maximum indebtedness. We increased the time frame for consultant confer with taxing districts to 45 days. Made it so that any new substantial amendment makes it so that you no longer can take taxes from bonds or special levies. Yeah, there's that one. So those are all new, they don't pertain to anything that's already in place. Whatever you have in your plan is grandfathered in your plan. But if you make any substantial changes to your plan, all of those come into effect. Except the annual reports. The annual report changes is for everybody.
Even though you don't have to do that, because no one's gonna check on times.
I try, I've done work for, I'd say 85% of the renewal agencies. I worked really hard on getting them to do their annual reports. Next slide. There were some questions from the North Bend School District. There are a couple of those that I can go over. And a lot of these are just political kinds of questions. And so I would prefer, after I go over a couple of them, that I take questions from all of you and then come back to those that are specific to North Bend. So that if other people don't want to listen to that, they don't have to. Eminent domain, we get this question a lot because our plans always say that you can do acquisition. Oregon passed legislation, it's been a number of years ago, that does not allow eminent domain of me taking your property and selling it to you. I can take your property if I need your property for a public sewer line. So for a specific purpose of implementing city plans, right? But I cannot take anybody's property as an urban renewal agency against somebody's will by eminent domain and then resell it to this developer out here who wants to make money off the property. Okay? If you want to sell me your property, I'm happy to buy your property as an urban renewal agency if I can afford it. And then when I resell it, I can make sure it's developed into the thing that we want developed, which is always helpful because if you have a prime piece of property in your downtown and you don't have control over it, you don't know what's going to go there, but you may have a great idea of what you think should go there. So if you're able to acquire and hold that property and facilitate that new development, I urge you to do that. But eminent domain may not take property from non-willing sellers.
Not even for the public good.
You can for the public good.
See that, because that's confusing, because it says acquisition from willing sellers only. But for the public good, then you can do condemnation?
Okay. I talked about just a minute ago, I said sidewalks, you have to do sidewalks, sewer line, streets, whatever, for the public good.
Okay.
Your city has condemnation authority. Your agency has that same condemnation authority. If I'm trying to develop property, I can't take your property and sell it to you.
So
You can sell it to me and I can sell it to him.
So what happens if, for example, the cheese factory, they were thinking of selling, I don't know if it was the building or the business, like a year or two ago, they wanted us to change the documents that we signed. All right, let's say they ultimately sell that. for a huge profit. So we don't, that's fine, is it? Even though without us, it could.
Sometimes on those private investment deals, there's it's called a clawback provision that says if you sell this for profit in the future, part of that comes back to us. A lot of times those disappear after like 10 years because you figure if they've been there, invested in your community for 10 years, you don't need to claw back. So it really depends on whatever provisions you put into your documents at that time. And I don't know, I don't remember.
We said that for one thing, the restrooms are in the building. That
Right.
has to remain in public use.
Right.
And the part of the parking lot. But basically, his investment has all been in Coos Bay, except for the cheese factory.
Right.
That's another.
Do you say you want questions at the end? You're gonna get through.
Yeah, we're gonna. We know these questions are sitting here. We're going to wait to the end to make sure we can get to those, but I think, let's go.
Hold on a second. Can you cite an example or two of where eminent domain was used?
I do not do that. Any city manager here or operator of an urban renewal agency where you've used urban
City
domain?
of North Bend,
Eminent
in
domain?
its entire history, has never used eminent domain.
Neither is the city of Bandon.
I don't think it's very popular.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
It's pretty serious.
Yeah.
The nice thing in North Bend, we've never had to because we always have willing sellers. It's like even with our proposed housing development, we actually have already in writing all of the agreed deals for purchase. And so we have no need to do eminent domain. We have negotiated prices, we have negotiated terms. We can execute them when the urban renewal agency is ready. So it's never been an issue, it's never even come up.
So this question though, is URA, I mean, that's just cities all over can do that. That's not, URA isn't a special.
Yeah, too.
School district could, if they said, we really
Yes.
need the school right here. A school could take property, again, not thinking that would go over very well in the community. So this isn't like I'm just trying to figure out. Was there something in the documents that made people think that this is a possibility?
I think the document allows acquisition.
I mean, that was actually my question. And the reason, and you actually answered it well, because what I didn't understand was the difference between the willing and the and the eminent domain, and you made it clear that it's the private reinvestment is the willing. So that makes sense to me.
Good, thank you. Yes.
I worked at an agency where we once used friendly condemnation. And that provided the property owner tax benefits that he wouldn't have had otherwise. So it was through a friendly condemnation.
Right, and I've had urban renewal agency city managers ask me about that, and I'm not a lawyer. And I don't know if you can do that in Oregon or not, because we can't do eminent domain. So I don't know, so if anybody asks you to do that here, I'd get your lawyer on the line. And but I have heard for tax reasons that some investors do want that process to happen, yeah. Yes.
The eminent domain issue also was a unique question at the beginning of the North Bend process, because the school district office is within the URA down.
Right.
And so we start talking about eminent domain, could the URA team decide that they want, a property like the school district office, because it sits right there in a block that could be considered a prime block in future development. And so we also answered that question the first time around, which, one taxing agency cannot exercise eminent domain for the tax.
Right. I remember you asked that and we answered it the same way, which is.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that one was the question kept coming up. So in the 11th hour before we went to the vote, we're like, well, we'll just take you out of the district, which will not benefit you in the long term. Because the day that you want to sell your building, should that ever occur, or you want to work with the taxing urban renewal agency on improving your building, you're gonna wanna be in the URA
Right.
district.
Right.
And so we tried to lay that out, and so it really comes down to, you know, we'll be back before the school district, next week. What's today? What day is today?
28th.
Yeah, but
Monday.
Monday, sorry, it's been a blur, I've been nonstop. So, yeah, a week from Thursday, and so that, it begs to offer up, do you wanna be in the district or not in the district? Because there's value in that,
Right.
even on private entities of being in that district. It's the same thing with, the enterprise zones or the opportunity zones.
Right.
Those have a lot of impact for private property owners.
Right.
Because they all come to you asking for grants.
Right. And if I were the school district, I want to be in the area, but I know there are all kinds of other political things that go on in a community, but so we have a decision point here. I think after this, I just have a bunch of pictures of different kinds of urban renewal projects. I want to make sure I get all of your questions answered, and I want to make sure that these questions are just about the North Bend plan. And I want to make sure we answer those, but I don't want everybody to have to sit through that if they aren't interested. So do people want me to go through projects? I see 2 yeses, 3 yeses.
Yeah.
4 yeses.
I'd rather hear this information.
Okay, who wants to hear this information? Raise your hands for me.
Are you a hard out?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's go through this. Some of this is not for me to answer, but I can start. Where will the housing be placed? So I believe when someone was looking at this, they were looking at the relationship to local objectives section of the amendment in the plan. And in that, we have to compare the comprehensive plan to the types of projects that are being proposed in the urban renewal plan. And so the way we do that is we take whatever money might be spent on in terms of projects and say, yes, there are comprehensive plan goals that support the use of the expenditure of urban renewal money on that kind of project. So we aren't making up these goals for urban renewal only. Those come from the comprehensive plan, and they show that the comprehensive plan supports the kinds of activities we're proposing in the urban renewal plan. So I think sometimes that's confusing, and it's again just a requirement of the statute that we make a finding that the urban renewal plan or urban renewal plan amendment conforms to our comprehensive plan.
And sort of restating, so the state requires every government entity, whether you're a city or a county, to do a housing needs assessment and then a housing implementation study. And so we have to review that for the entire city. And because the urban renewal plan is part of that, does the efforts in that district support the statewide approved adopted plan? It does not mean that all those housing types are going in that small little slice of, because it would be impossible.
Right.
In fact, I still don't know how North Bend's ever going to meet its statewide goals, but that's a whole other political issue. And I think the other jurisdictions have the same issues.
Right. So what we're doing is taking the boundary of the urban renewal plan, this little boundary here, and then the boundary of the comprehensive plan. And we're saying what we're doing in this little area here conforms to what we're wanting overall for our city that's stated in this comprehensive plan. So that's what these references are, these goal references are.
So I do have.
Yeah, sure.
So all these different things, though, you're saying that it may not fit there, but no one is ever saying where any of these would go. It's just, are people just not wanting to say?
Oh, no, they actually are all stated. They're actually stated in our housing needs assessment, our housing implementation study. They're published on our website under our published plans. And so these are all statewide plans. So you start with your comprehensive plan, your transportation plan, your housing needs plan. And so think of those as overlays within the city. And so in this case, these are eligible projects that can occur within. The only project in our plan that's housing related is the annex project, which is the apartment. That's the only plan, but we had to show that in our housing implementation study, that there was actually a verified need for apartments and or for housing in our community to meet the statewide plans. And then we get state approval. Does that make sense?
I kind of.
And
So
that-
it's there as an option, but you don't have current plans to do anything at this.
There's no, so we have to list out our
Except-
projects. We have to list out our projects. And so we can't embark on a project that's not in the plan.
Okay.
So we have options in the.
Okay.
So that same philosophy goes down to transportation. You can only spend urban renewal money within an urban renewal area. But by spending urban renewal money, transportation there, that gives you your other citywide urban money, general fund money or whatever. So you can allow you to spend that everywhere else in the city.
So for instance, like our streetscape was Urban Renewal Agency and state grant, but it frees up because we only get enough gas tax money to pave about a quarter mile of a street at a time. Because under state law, after they got sued, we also have to do curb and gutter, we have to do ADA intersections, and so that astronomically increases. And so the URA money allows us to focus on downtown. For instance, case in point, we just did a citywide LED lighting upgrade. The URA paid for the URA lights in the district, not the rest of the city.
Houseless, I think we talked about earlier.
But I didn't hear from North Bend.
North Bend can tell you. So houselessness is, and we can always have an offsite conversation of everything we do with houselessness. So there was a Supreme Court ruling that came out. Unfortunately, the legislature and proposed legislation didn't get to it in time to be able to drop bills and take it seriously. And so Grants Pass and everybody else, we are sort of in the limb because you have a Supreme Court ruling, but then we have a state law that trumps. And so every city, every county here, we shall abide by state law. There's only so much we can do, and part of state law mandated that we actually identify time, manner, place. And so about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, the mayor can talk about this. She ran a town hall meeting, packed, overflowing, over 1,000 people participated, and they said, this is where we want houselessness to occur in our city with overnight camping to meet state law. We can't change that. We can actually be sued if we violate rights. And unfortunately, it's sad when we see on internet pictures of a designated, parking space for houselessness at certain hours, and folks are like, hey, look, we can camp for free instead of go to the KOA. That's not what it's intended for, but under state law, we cannot do anything additional over and above what we're doing now, because our lawyers and our insurance company said they will not cover us for a lawsuit. So we're doing the maximum we can, and our numbers are actually very low, but the reality is there are insufficient services in this county, and we continue to fight for those. And we're like down here in rural area and we're like the last to be heard. As I tell folks, and I'll repeat this, only once. It's fascinating that I pick up the phone in a couple minutes, get an email or a phone call to Salem, and it takes 6 months to get something back. We do have very responsive state house representatives, but our senators are in the minority in the state legislature. And so they argue, they fight for us, but the next legislative session, not the special session, but the League of Cities and the Association of Counties will come together with a modification plan for changing state law to address the Supreme Court ruling, because every other state got it passed except Oregon, because we have a state law.
So I totally understand all that. I guess my concern is if we wanna put all this really nice housing and we're trying to get families and kids to go to this school, and you have this hub right there, there's no way we can like go back and try to change a designated area?
Yes.
The city council.
The council can.
Yeah.
That's what
And
my
they
concern
evaluate
is. Because if you put the brand new, really nice thing, you spend millions of dollars and then you've got tents right around, no one's gonna wanna live there.
We just have to have an area, and so one of the reasons why we have that area currently is because there isn't as much housing.
So it can
So
be
we could
changed,
do
that was my question.
And our council actually meets with the police chief in a public meeting quarterly and actually reviews that. And it's a public meeting, anyone can come and see, they get the numbers, and so absolutely. And so, yes, the council can always change things. We have done things like asking the library district, will you please turn your Wi-Fi off when you close? We do what we can, so that we don't violate the law, but we also don't make it, Motel 6.
Right, yeah.
I do think that like Coos Bay has some really good examples of, they've taken some old buildings that came down and, now there's like a Prefontaine Memorial up there that often, if you're not interested in people who congregating in certain areas, the best way to take care of that is have new development, not empty blighted buildings. They're not gonna, and you see that in Bandon, you see it in Coos Bay, like when there's development in, then people scatter away to like other areas that have the broken windows and the chain link fences and the blighted buildings. So this is a surefire way to get people not wanting to camp where there's a bunch of people coming through the area.
Were there some chats?
Just got one more. No questions, just comments.
Okay.
All right, so comments. Most municipalities look at residential as off limits for temporary homeless or camping area. And then we have, thank you for all of this information. And then, yes, 1,000% mayor, I don't know which mayor.
Mary, take that one.
All right, here you go, that's for you. Oh, there you go. So no other questions, yeah.
Okay, and there was a question just about a chart in the report. And those charts again are part of the requirements. We have to talk about existing conditions in an urban renewal area. So we get assessors information on land use, zoning, and comprehensive plan designations. Sometimes the assessor's information doesn't have information for one or more of the parcels. But anyway, on those parcels, we put in the code that the assessor has for that parcel of what that actual land use is. So land uses can be exempt, commercial, industrial, residential. So that is what that information is and where it comes from. That information isn't used at all when implementing an urban renewal area. It is only part of the requirements for putting together a plan amendment.
Okay. Because one of the main things I had a question was this, it says the land use exempt was 25% and then it was going to 0. And so so down below in the comprehensive plan, there's no exempt land use.
That's because comprehensive plan designations don't include exempt. So exempt is only for a land use. When you go to comprehensive plan designations, there isn't a comprehensive plan designation category that says exempt. They're either commercial, industrial, residential. those that I had listed there. That's, so you may have,
What happens to those exempt lots? That, like, there's like a church in there and other things that don't bring in.
it's an exempt land use. The underlying zoning or comprehensive plan is not, doesn't say exempt. So it allows for other uses in the future if that church goes away. So a good example, one of my very first projects was in Astoria, in the urban renewal area. And as I was going down from my first meeting in 2005, and I was looking at their land use, and 51% of their area was exempt. And I said to the person I was working with, how in the world are they going to have a successful urban renewal area when 51% of the properties are exempt? And the answer to that really is finding those properties that are in poor use, like we listed for the existing conditions, blighting formulas, and putting those into active use. So buildings with the broken windows, or buildings with nobody on the ground floor, or no upper floor housing, and putting those into active use. And if you have exempt within your area, it neither really hinders or helps your area in terms of urban renewal. You could take it out, you could leave it in because you want to do a storefront loan to it to make it look more attractive in the area, because it is, you know, if it's servicing your community, but it looks horrible, you'd like to make sure that at least the facade of it looks good for your community. But exempt units are never going to increase that assessed value. And as long as you're not constricted on your total acreage, it doesn't hurt to have it in your urban renewal area.
So,
I just don't know where it went.
let me speak specific to the church, and I think that'll help clear it up. And the church is in the former theater that's between the annex and
No,
the
that's not
city
what I
hall.
want to talk about. But the River Church, I don't know, it's like right at the corner across from Ashworth.
So,
Right next to.
Pentecostal one.
I don't even remember.
that's
Yeah,
not
that-
in the district.
That's not a district.
No. That's not even in the district. No.
One of the big problems is, the only thing more complicated than urban renewal is Oregon land use.
I see how it went from 25% to 0
Yeah.
and where it's going.
So there are.
Is it two different first, maybe they took it out?
There are two different charts. I'll come talk to you when the meeting's over and we'll look at the charts.
But I do want to address this first, because it has come up in the past. So the annex property is the annex property. And so that is Plan 1. So our urban renewal agency, with the county, agreed to purchase that property. I, as city manager, have brought the suggestion to the urban renewal agency that if we got first right of refusal for the church, and given the fact that our existing city hall needs about $12 million worth of repairs. Right now, I need $250,000 just to repair the roof. And so I have told staff it's cheaper to buy 55-gallon trash cans. And that's unfortunate, but I don't have the money to do the roof. We do not have it. And so with maximum indebtedness, that's where we had approached the county as the other participating, because I can do a more economic project by having twice as much apartments in downtown. Use the downtown area, which I call as the below grade, and put city hall offices in there a whole lot more efficient. And not have to pay $12 million. I can't do the seismic upgrades. I can't afford to put the roof. And it was not built as a city hall, it was built as a fire station. And so by trying to, very much like the school board has buildings that it like needs bonds, we don't have the money either to fix. And so when I look at a project saying, well, it's a whole lot more affordable to put the city hall offices there, because then you actually have more government folks servicing still downtown, and you're not paying out 12 million, and you're including it in the cost of the annex, and you're bringing in $4 million of federal dollars to make it, which then we will ask the state for some additional dollars. And so it pencils out where it then generates program revenue through rents that then can come down and maintain infrastructure in downtown that we otherwise can't afford. For instance, like the road right in front of the school district and City Hall. That's the reality is that we are getting more creative and thinking out of the box in order to save taxpayers who will not foot the bill for the additional. And so it all is above board. If we do expand, we have the first right of refusal on the church. The church has a deed restriction that says that building can only be used for religious, but we also then have the agreement that will sunset that deed restriction because the building would be demolished. And so we have the agreement to purchase, the price to purchase, the deed restriction issues taken care of. But our URA not approve any expansion or anything included because we have to get the concurrence of the county for the offices. And then we have to get the school board to agree the maximum indebtedness. Otherwise, that project doesn't go on. If we get the concurrence of the school district, then that special levy that's up there goes bye-bye. Because we will sunset that with the major plan. And so we've been as transparent as we can. And as the mayor echoing her words, this is why it's always good to get in a room and have training. And I always tell folks, sometimes it's better to have someone from 100 miles away because they've heard from me, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily trust Jeff or I, because, you know, we're the ones pushing the plan. And so you get an expert from outside paid by, you know, grant dollars, and you get a, you know, the legal answer on everything. So.
He's got 20 years of experience.
So it's after 4. You signed up till 4. If anybody wants, if anybody wants to leave now, feel free to leave. I'm happy to stay a little bit if there are any additional questions from anybody. So we'll give you about 5 minutes for anybody who wants to leave, and anybody who wants to follow up may stay.